Hey everyone, happy weekend, and welcome to episode two of Friday Off Screen with Deepa and Jiju.
Hello.
Right? Hey. Okay. So what are we going to talk about today?
Bring it on. What's in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was thinking about travels, which is a constant theme in our discussions, I thought of talking about one place that we went to, I think about 4 years back, and that just stuck to me. I mean, that visual of that place just stuck to me. And then when you read upon the history of that place and the people who've lived in those places, it's just such a fascinating story. And then when we were reading about some of the current happenings as well, I could just find some connections. So I think in this episode we'll talk about a bit of travel.
Okay.
We'll talk about a bit of history.
Okay.
And we'll also talk about a bit of what we are seeing happening around, in terms of the downsizing by the large tech companies, and trying to draw a parallel to something that happened way back in 1940s.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Right? Yeah. So let me start with the trivia then,
okay.
right? To introduce the topic. What connects the following?
Okay.
Right? It's one word or two words that basically connect the following things.
Okay.
Number one, Anjappa restaurant.
Okay.
Number two, colorful handmade cement tiles.
Okay. You're talking about India, right?
Yes, I mean this one specifically is about India. So Anjappa restaurant, colorful handmade cement tiles.
Okay.
Our former finance minister, Mr. Chidambaram.
Okay. Okay. I know where this is going. Okay.
And some spicy chicken curry.
Okay. You're talking about Chettinad, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
So I think the focus of today's our Friday off-screen discussion, I wanted it to be on Chettinad.
Cool.
Right.
Awesome.
And Chettiars. So Deepu, tell me one thing. We've traveled to Karaikudi and the Chettinad region.
Yeah.
And what are your memories from that travel?
Great question. I cannot unsee what I saw.
Lovely.
in that Karaikudi region and Chettinad.
Yeah.
So what I saw were beautiful mansions, which took me to an era, almost like a dreamy land.
Yeah.
But were empty and hollow and almost ghost-like.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that is my never fading memory that I have about Chettinad. It is not about the chicken curry, or I mean, although I don't eat chicken, but it's not about the curries or the food or.
But
Not even Athangudi
but they had
tiles,
brilliant
but it was,
food, right?
yeah,
I mean, I remember going to that local mess for lunch
Oh my God.
in such a rural, rustic setting.
Right.
And as a hardcore non-vegetarian, that was heaven for me.
Right.
With brain curry and seafood and spicy food, brilliant cuisine,
Yes,
right?
yes.
But then, we came back with memories of
Memories which were slightly off, more than what I could cherish about the food or the other aspects.
Right.
It was more about, oh my God, how sad.
Yeah, exactly.
Or helplessness.
Right.
Those were my emotions which I came back with, unfortunately.
And just to set the context, right? When you are talking about these lost mansions or the haunted, I mean, haunted is not the right word, but then
Ghosted.
the kind of ghosted, abandoned kind of mansions, right? I just want to put up the point here that we're not talking about one or two mansions,
No,
right?
no.
There are hundreds of them.
There were hundreds of them, and there were streets lined with those mansions, not just one. And it's not like one mansion was palatial.
Yeah.
Almost all mansions were like, it appeared as though each were competing with each other at some given point of time in history.
And fun fact, I think, when I was reading, there are about 15,000 such mansions in the Chettinad region, which is about 75 villages, but there are 15,000 mansions. And, all of us have, are accustomed to villas and things like that. But what are these mansions? Because, it's a sight to behold on itself, right? I mean, What are your memories? I mean, how would you describe those mansions?
So what was very striking for me is if you associate a king or a couple of rich nobles, you can always say that hey, they have acquired wealth and they have put it in some palace or something. But these, to me, from what I read little about them, these to me were more or less like general people, aspiring people, and they accrued wealth by immigrating to other countries, mainly Southeast Asia and especially Burma in specific, where they earned riches. And then so these were quite relatable people. They were not like people of some
born with silver spoon
or something, but they were quite relatable to us. And yet they but in comparison to that, what the houses they had was like, you saw that, right? Like their mirrors and chandeliers are from Prague, Czech, and from Belgium, and their flooring was from Italy, and their everything. I mean,
the teak was from Burma, and porcelain from somewhere else, crystals from Swarovski, things like that.
I mean,
and those homes, I mean, they had what, 40, 50 rooms?
I think close to 100 or something.
Yeah, exactly. So they were absolutely palatial. I mean, that was. It felt very grounded, because I think the architecture was very South Indian, right?
Yes, with the courtyard,
with the central courtyard, with an opening, with pillars around, very South Indian in terms of architecture.
It was like a scaled up house of a normal South Indian home in one way.
But then every item that was used to build those homes felt like exquisite, and felt like obviously they were imported, right? And I think what really left a memory in us was to see hundreds of such homes, one after the other, in lanes, and they were beautifully planned lanes, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
that's another striking
exactly
thing.
I mean,
like the lanes were so almost like perpendicular lanes.
Yeah, exactly,
and
perpendicular
parallel
lanes. Yeah,
it was very structured and very planned.
Very well planned.
But right now, what's happening? People are selling their utensils, their mirrors, their chandeliers to have a daily livelihood.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a situation.
And I mean, as a side effect of that, you do have an antique market.
Yes.
In some of the Karaikudi and other.
That was a trigger for me to
go
there when I was designing homes.
We actually started that journey as a scouting trip for a decor and other items
to curate certain decor elements,
but then when you really look at it, those items were actually coming from homes that people were selling, right?
At some point of time they belong to them, and only because they were helpless they are selling it off. I mean,
absolutely. So I mean, I think that also got me thinking about as someone who is visiting that place, about the sad state in which our heritage and our history, for example, is maintained, unfortunately, in a number of places back home, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
So these homes, I mean, even though they are private homes, they do not just tell the story of Chettiads, but they tell the story of that era. Right. They tell the story of British India. They tell the story of colonialism, right?
I may want to add, they also tell or reinforce a belief which is called the third generation curse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the third generation curse is basically, it's like the father will earn, the son will build, but the grandson will beg. It's something like that. So if you don't take forward your wealth in a more strategic way, planned strategic way, it could end up similar to the dilapidated situation of what we are seeing in Chettinad.
Absolutely.
The region of Chettinad.
So the curse of the third generation.
Yes.
Interesting. I think a classic dilemma for family businesses.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So brilliant. So just coming back, in terms of preserving our heritage and history, right? We do have a number of our buildings, a number of our heritage buildings that are preserved, but there are a number of sites where, which are in a complete state of, shambles.
Yes.
Right. So you do, even in the Chettinad region, we saw some of them are converted into mansions, some of them are, and maintained, some of them are converted into hotels and resorts and hotels. But the vast majority are left to its own state.
Yes.
While they are private buildings, while there is, there's obviously litigation happening with their current owners and things like that. I think there's a huge opportunity for us to preserve a part of that history.
Absolutely.
Especially the state taking, or a trust, for example, taking interest for that. For example, because we just cannot recreate that lost history, right? We cannot recreate those homes, the grandeur of those homes, the things that have been used to, make those homes. I remember we walked into, one of those homes where, again, most of those homes at the moment, they are inhabited by 2 or 3 people, and they are in their late 60s, 70s, they're pretty old folks. And I remember them showing us the old ledgers, that the Chettiars used. So significant history, that we have out there, which unfortunately is, that we are losing.
Yes.
Right. So I think there's a great opportunity out there. And this is the Chettinad is just one example of it. But I'm sure that there are so many different examples of that in terms of us documenting and creating that end-to-end experience for travelers, right? I'm just thinking that even a museum of Chettiar history,
that's a great idea,
right?
Why not?
A
I'm
museum
not
of
too sure if there is something. We have seen the palace, the Chettinad Palace, whereby we just went in and there was a person who could explain verbally all those things, but I have not seen like a tour or a strong documentation about those things. So it was just a verbal communication that happened. Absolutely. So I was also fascinated by what happened, right, with these Chettiars. If you look at the timeline, it is from that mid 19th century, can I say? Although from 17th century onwards they were into the kind of a trading.
I think Chettiars have a significant history of being a mercantile class.
Right.
But then
and when do they date back? Almost like
but I think the exploits that are more recently documented and really interesting, I think they come from 1800s and mid 1800s.
And when did their fall almost happen? By mid 1900s, like 1960s,
exactly.
Post-war and post-independence.
Exactly. So it's almost 100-year golden period. They're still there. The Murugappa group and multiple Chettiar businesses are still existing. Karu Vaishya Bank and things like that. But then the golden period of Chettiars, where I think from
almost for like 100 years,
mid 1800s to mid 1900s.
Right. So they, most of this riches to rags happened from Chettiars going to Burma. Natukotai Chettiars, what they are typically labeled in all documentation. So they had been to Burma and they were they monopolized. Almost over the time. They were the monopoly for lending money, and they were, when the depression in 1930s happened, the prices of the paddy fields and all fell down, and because of which they couldn't get the money back especially from the agricultural sector. So they, although they had taken over the land and whatever was pawned for the money lending, but again so at one point I even read that 25% of Burma Burmese land was actually in the hands of Chettiars. So that I don't know if it is really sustainable if you look at it in one way. And then during this 1960s, when Burma got independent in 1948, from then to 1968, about the 20-year crucial time is when Chettiars were really, almost they were in the downfall and the local people really resisted their monopoly, and even the army took over Burma and they just expelled all Chettiars, most of them from Burma, and leaving them with nothing. They couldn't even have they couldn't even repatriate their wealth. So they almost came back with nothing, and this was essentially the land or the fall that they came back with nothing, and they were not even in a position to maintain their large mansions. So it's such a pity. I mean, at once they were like kings almost, and then they just came back with nothing.
Absolutely. And I think that is where I felt that the history, especially the golden period of Chettiars, mid 1800s to mid 1900s, I think it's also the history of European colonialism, especially the British expansion in Southeast Asia. So the Chettiars were not just in Burma, but you see them in Sri Lanka, you see them in Malaysia, you see them in Singapore, in Indonesia. So they were the informal financiers, of a number of these British settlements in Southeast Asia. When formal banking was not there, they were already a mercantile class. They were ready to lend to people who were not significantly credit worthy and things like that. And before formal banking was established in some of these countries like Sri Lanka, Burma, Malaysia, etc., Chettiars were filling in that gap.
So they penetrated into that unorganized sector of that money lending and all before the structured banking system and lending system.
Exactly. And so it's also interesting to look at the contribution of Chettiars in the financial growth of some of these countries as well, right? But then
it's
history. As with anything, nationalism, you did have, the Great Depression of 1929-30, when the prices fell and that affected the Chettiars. And then as British withdrew from Asia and these countries started becoming independent, nationalism took over and they had to kind of, leave everything and come back, right? So thinking about that, I also felt that is such a nice reflection on the experiences that some of the Indian expatriates go through. Right. Right now, we are talking about so many of our Indians in the US who've been laid off by Microsoft and Google and Meta and other companies,
thousands of them
who are on H1B, right? Who unfortunately have to be have to come back, let's say, if their visa is not sorted, right?
And they would not have enough time to settle all their wealth and so on, because I'm sure they're given shorter notice and you cannot make optimum out of that.
And some of them, they would have kids who are who are born there and citizens of that country, who would have significant immovable assets and investments in those countries, but they have to come back, right? So we see that with the Chettiars, they went through this struggle in the 1940s and 1960s where, economic policies, political policies changed and, you did not have an option but just to leave your wealth and just come back to your country. Right. Another example is, I think, 1970s. It happened in Uganda, where Indians were literally expelled. They were given, I think, few months to kind of just leave the country by Idi Amin. So it's happened in the past, and
it's still happening.
It'll continue to happen. So I think I just wanted to also dedicate this. Our discussion to so many of those folks who are going through this unfortunate experience in the US and other countries, and a constant struggle for expats,
the immigrants,
that uncertainty is always behind you, So I think that probably gets us to the close.
If you further want to read, there is an interesting book. I'll make a mention of it. It is similarities of communities like Chettiars and Marwaris.
Okay.
So even Marwaris almost during the same timeline, they rose to a very high.
Right.
By they were also traders, right? They were business. They were also into money lending and so on. And they have settled in Bombay and Calcutta.
Yeah.
And they also rose almost to that monopoly. They networked among themselves in the community, and they gained trust with even British. And but there is a very good comparison between the Marwari community and the Chettiar community. While both had very similar aspects of or aspirations for monopolizing certain businesses. So that is another addition that you can read upon.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I would just conclude our talk by one is travel to Chettinad, and experience. Sometimes you go to see beauty in a place when you travel. You go to see a beautiful place. You go to seek peace and happiness. But when you go to Chettinad, you will be marveled by the grandeur of these mansions.
Once upon a time in Chettinad.
But also you will be left with this sense of loss.
Yes.
That seeing hundreds of these beautiful mansions that are 40-50 room built in dilapidated state, that's a sight to see, and then to kind of reflect. So absolutely travel to Chettinad, enjoy the spicy food of Chettinad, an ode to our expat friends in the US or anywhere anywhere around the world who are going through a time of uncertainty due to layoffs or other political decisions, right? So cheers to that. And see you next weekend.
Yeah, sure. Bye.